following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 4, Language. It addresses the assessment standard that requires learners to use structurally sound sentences in a meaningful and functional manner. Learners should be able to use active and passive voice for appropriate purposes. Learners should also be able to use correct word order in sentences with growing accuracy and explain how word order can influence meaning.
Hello, welcome. I'm Nicola Shongwe. In our lesson, we looked at the components of sentences, which we said are subjects, verbs, and objects. In this lesson extension, we're going to turn our attention to the order in which these components are given. So, we will learn about sentences written in the active and passive voice. In some languages, it doesn't matter much where you put the words in a sentence, but in English, the position of a word can alter the meaning of that sentence. Let's look at some examples. The vicious dog bit the boy. The boy bit the vicious dog. The vicious boy bit the dog. Dog vicious, the bit boy the. The first three sentences all have different meanings. In the first sentence, the vicious dog bites the boy. In the second sentence, the boy is doing the biting. And in the third sentence, the boy is vicious. The final sentence contains the exact same words as the other sentences, but it makes no sense. From this, you should be able to see that words cannot be randomly arranged and that the position in which they are placed determines meaning. In English, the most common order for placement is the active voice. The active voice is a sentence is equal to a subject plus a verb plus an object. Let's have a look at some sentences that follow this pattern. We ordered hamburgers. They received their results. In all of these sentences, the subject comes first, then the verb, then the object. We did the ordering, so we is the subject. What got ordered? Hamburgers. So, the hamburgers are the objects. What do you think are the subject and object of the second sentence, they received their results? So both of these sentences are in the active voice, because in the active voice, the subject performs the action. Now this is important, so remember it. In the active voice, the subject performs the action. As I've said, the active voice is the most common form of arranging words. And in fact, the sentences that we've just looked at would look strange if we reverse the order of the words like this. Hamburgers were ordered by us. The results were received by them. These sentences may not sound great, but they are actually grammatically correct. This time, however, they are in the passive voice. In the passive voice, the subject receives or suffers the action. This is also important, so remember it. In the passive voice, the subject receives or suffers the action. Let's have another look at our sample sentences to see how the passive voice works. In the first sentence, the hamburgers are having the ordering done to them. In the second sentence, the results are being received. This sounds a bit clumsy, so why would anyone want to use the passive voice? Well, Let's have a look at these sentences and see how they've been adapted now. Hamburgers were ordered. The results were received. In the first sentence, you're told that the hamburgers were ordered, but you're not told who or what did the ordering. In the second sentence, you're also not told who received the results. So when you use the passive voice, you don't have to say who performed the action. The sentence still makes sense when this information is excluded. Now, if you had to rearrange these sentences into the active voice and, for example, say, ordered hamburgers and received their results, you would find that these sentences are not complete because they have no subject. So in the active voice, you cannot hide who performed the action, but in the passive voice, you can. It will still make sense even if you don't say who performed the action. Can you think of where being able to write in the passive voice could come in handy? Think about it. Well, here are a few examples. I'm sure you'll be able to come up with some more of your own. Let's imagine that there's been a murder. A journalist would know that someone is dead, but they wouldn't know who committed the crime. So, for example, they could write something like this. A woman was stabbed to death. This sentence is in the passive voice because the subject, the woman, has suffered the action of being stabbed. We are not told who or what did the stabbing, but the sentence still makes sense. So using the passive voice enables you to say what action occurred without saying who did it. Sometimes, though, you do know who committed the action, but you just don't want to say who it is. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Mum, the window broke. Here, the passive voice is used so that the boy doesn't have to say that he is responsible. He doesn't want to say, I broke the window, so he uses the passive voice instead. Sometimes we know who did the action, and we don't mind saying, but it actually makes no difference who did it, and it's probably better not to say. Would you write a science experiment up like this? Gideon mixed sulfur and hydrogen. In this case, it doesn't matter that Gideon did the mixing. Anyone could have mixed these two elements and the result would have been the same. So using the passive voice for academic or scientific writing can help you to sound more objective. So this is more like what should have been written. Sulfur and hydrogen were mixed. This sounds much more scientific, and it's better that it leaves out the name of the person who did the mixing. Let's look at another example. If you're writing a creative essay, you could use your own point of view because this makes the piece more interesting. If you're writing a literature essay, though, you want to sound as if you're giving facts rather than your own opinion. So you would use the passive voice in order to sound more objective. Macbeth is thought of as a tragic hero. This sentence is in the passive voice and sounds objective. It implies that many people think this is true, whereas this sentence, I think Macbeth is a tragic hero, is in the active voice, and it seems as if it's just my opinion. Sometimes the passive voice is used to hint at something when you don't want to give a command. Let's look at this example. The garbage must be taken out. You could also have said, you must take out the garbage. Essentially, the message is the same. Please remove the garbage. However, when it's phrased in the passive voice, the command is more gentle. So we've seen that the passive voice has a number of uses. Let's summarize what they are. The passive voice avoids saying who did the verb, can sound more objective, and makes a command seem more polite. Keep these uses in mind, but take care. The passive voice should not be overused. It may sound as though you're being pretentious and are trying to sound more objective than you really are. People may also wonder why it is you're not saying who did the verb, and then you begin to sound suspicious. Here's an example. The politician said money was taken from the trust fund. Doesn't this put a bit of doubt in your mind? If I read a sentence like this in the newspaper, I would think either the politician took the money himself or is trying to cover something up. Politicians really should have a better idea of what's going on. When you read, be on the lookout for the passive voice and try to figure out if it's being used for a genuine purpose or whether it's just part of a cover-up. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for joining me and see you next time.